Hello, welcome back to my channel. If you are new to this channel, my name is Frank Zhu, and I'm a college professor teaching sociology, history, and philosophy. I'm also an award-winning landscape photographer. Today's video is the second of my 2 video series on the Renaissance. In the first episode, I made a very brief introduction of the Renaissance and explained why humanism was the main characteristic of the Renaissance. I also talked about why the Renaissance started in Italy. If you missed that video, I will leave a link down below. Please make sure that you watch that video before you start watching this video. Today, I'm going to focus on the Renaissance literature and art, talking about those great figures such as Dante, Da Vinci, Raphael, and Michelangelo. As a conclusion, I will discuss the impact of the Renaissance on European history. Today's video may be a little bit long. Please bear with me until the end. By the way, this video series is based on my published book, which is entitled Essentials of World History, the 3rd edition, which is available on Amazon. As I pointed out in my last video, the Renaissance refers to the rebirth of classical Greek and Roman culture. Classical literature was, of course, an important aspect of this rebirth. Since the collapse of Rome, the Latin language had undergone major changes during the Middle Ages. However, at the time of the Renaissance, many writers came to think that the Latin of Cicero, who was a Roman historian, was the best literary language. For them, the medieval Latin was corrupt, and only the classical literature was pure in style and form. In their view, in order to speak and write correctly and gracefully, one should imitate the ancient Roman and Greek writers. The Ciceronian style thus became the trend of the time. Some of the Renaissance writers, such as Petrarch, who has often been called the father of Italian Renaissance humanism, traveled extensively in Europe searching for manuscripts of classical works. Because of his efforts, many original manuscripts were made available to scholars who had only been able to read secondary commentaries at the time. A great literary figure that represented the transition from the Middle Ages to the Renaissance was the Italian poet Dante Alighieri. Born before the Renaissance, Dante maintained a strong religious outlook. However, he wrote with a deep interest in all aspects of the human life and behavior. His greatest work is the epic poem, The Divine Comedy, which took him over 10 years to finish. In this poem, he imagined himself taking an afterlife journey through hell, purgatory, and heaven. It is a work that provides an insightful look at the political, social, and philosophical thought of his time. Dante wrote it in Italian rather than Latin, which was for the elites, because he wanted ordinary people to understand his work. Its vivid language and imagery set an example for many later writers. The Renaissance movement is perhaps best remembered for its artistic achievements, which were characterized by naturalism and non-religious themes. While the Middle Ages artists focused on religious subjects, Renaissance artists paid more attention to a naturalistic style. This was partly because the Renaissance artists developed a desire to realistically depict the natural world in their art, and partly because they were competing for patronage of wealthy merchants and bankers who were secular in thinking. Some of the old practice of religious painting, such as sizing figures in proportion to their spiritual significance, was abandoned. Oil painting became popular and some important techniques were developed, such as perspective and depth in art. While Italy gave birth to many artistic geniuses, Renaissance art is nowadays often associated with three giants: Da Vinci, Raphael, and Michelangelo. So let's first talk about Da Vinci. Da Vinci, who was born in Florence, best personified the ideals of the Renaissance. Though extremely talented in many fields, he was best known as a master of the art of realistic painting. His most famous painting is perhaps the Mona Lisa, which was probably done in 1507. It is a half-length portrait painting of an elegant lady with a mysterious smile. This painting was first acquired by King Francis I of France, and for centuries it was owned by the French royalty. Napoleon, who was the French emperor after the French Revolution, once hung it in his bedroom. Not until 1804 was it exhibited in public at the Louvre Museum. The Mona Lisa also remains a hot topic for discussions and debates among scholars. Some argue that the mysterious smile is not genuine because of its asymmetry. Some modern artists claim that Mona Lisa was actually modeled on the painter himself. However, most historians and professors of history, myself included, agree that Mona Lisa was the wife of a rich merchant in Florence. After all, Da Vinci was commissioned by many rich merchants. The fact that this painting was once stolen by an Italian museum employee who probably acted because of his Italian patriotism made it even more famous. I remember when I first saw the painting in person over 20 years ago, I was really impressed by the fact that such a realistic-looking artistic work was painted over 500 years ago. Another famous painting by Da Vinci is The Last Supper. This religious painting is a careful study of the emotions that each of Jesus' disciples was likely to have expressed when Jesus told them that one of them would betray him. Da Vinci was also a scientist, often secretly cutting open dead human bodies in order to better see how nature worked inside the human body. He even had an idea of inventing a submarine. His talents in architecture, music, and sculpture were well known as well. Now let's talk about Raphael. Raphael was a Florentine man who showed talents as a painter at an early age. At 25, he was already regarded as one of Italy's best painters, admired for the perfection and softness of his paintings. Raphael was well known for his frescoes in the Vatican Palace and was especially admired for his numerous Madonnas. In these paintings, he tried to achieve an ideal of human beauty. His Alba Madonna reveals a world of balance, harmony, and order, the underlying principles of the art of the classical world of Greece and Rome. Another famous painting of Raphael's is The School of Athens, which depicts Plato and Aristotle and other ancient Greek philosophers. I took this shot while I was visiting the Vatican museums. Now let's talk about another great Renaissance artist, Michelangelo. He was born in Caprice but raised in Florence. He was an extremely accomplished painter, sculptor, and architect. he engaged himself in a remarkable number of projects. Nowadays, he is known for creating the fresco ceiling of the Sistine Chapel of Rome. The figures on the ceiling reveal an ideal type of human being with perfect proportions. They looked so realistic that Pope Julius II, who had commissioned the artist for the work, ordered to have the private parts of some of the figures covered up with fig leaves, much to the anger of Michelangelo himself. Another project of his was probably more famous, the statue of David. It is a colossal marble statue commissioned by the Florentine government. By the way, David was the great biblical war hero and Hebrew king. Out of a piece of marble that nobody else had dared to touch for 50 years, Michelangelo spent 3 years from 1501 until 1504 creating a 14-foot high figure. It was the largest piece of sculpture in Italy since ancient Roman times. It depicts a perfect male form, muscular, graceful, and nude. Through David, Michelangelo demonstrated the beauty and glory of human beings, which were at the heart of the Renaissance arts. Besides beauty, this statue also shows dramatic and emotional postures and expressions of human beings. This is also true with another statue, Pieta, which depicts a grief-looking Mary looking at the dead body of Jesus lying across her lap. By the way, since the Renaissance time, there have been many replicas of David, including one in front of the Town Hall of Florence, where the David statue was originally erected, and another one on the square of Michelangelo, which is cast in bronze. I took this shot on the square of Michelangelo in Florence. The Renaissance was undoubtedly an extremely important time period in European history. Values changed, long-standing beliefs were tested, and a whole new culture was created. A distinctive Renaissance style in literature, art, music, and architecture was produced. The creative geniuses such as Leonardo da Vinci have remained influential in Western culture until today. Intellectually, the new ways of thinking fostered more freedom and helped to give rise to new universities with practical emphasis on medical and legal studies. For example, the University of Oxford was founded about 1200, with Cambridge University following shortly afterward. By 1500, nearly 100 universities had been established in Europe. In addition to academia, creativity also flourished in the practical world and contributed substantially to the rise of merchant power, such as improvements in sailing technology, new techniques in mapping, etc. The use of gunpowder is another example. Although the Chinese had invented gunpowder centuries before, the Europeans of the Renaissance applied the invention in the 14th century to become the masters of gun making. By the early and mid-1400s, cannonballs were widely used. Printing technology invented by the Chinese was also adopted and widely applied in Europe during the Renaissance. More importantly, the intellectual and technical achievements of the Renaissance paved the way for the thinkers and scientists of the 17th century to lay the foundation for modern science and technology. Well, that is all that I wanted to talk about in today's video, which is the second of my 2 video series on the Renaissance. Thank you for watching this video. and I will see you soon.